Welcome to This Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're here joining me today. We're going to embark on this totally fascinating, high definition zoom in journey of the human body. We're going to literally peel back the layers of complexity that make up living organisms and look straight at the very foundation of life itself. So, if you've ever wondered exactly how biological structures are built from the ground up, well, you're in exactly the right place. Okay, let's dive into this and look at our roadmap for today's metaphorical construction site tour. We'll start with the biochemical basis of life, figure out the chemical recipe of our cells, identify the four fundamental biomolecules, compare different cell compositions, and finally, look at exactly how we build and break down macromolecules. Section 1. The biochemical basis of life. So before we look at the individual microscopic bricks, we really need to understand the incredibly high stakes of what we're actually exploring here. You see, biochemistry provides the vital information about literally all processes carried out in living organisms. It dictates everything, from the physical construction of your body structures right down to the flow of information, like DNA orchestrating protein synthesis, but it actually goes way beyond just normal functioning. Understanding this biochemical foundation is exactly how we investigate abnormal mechanisms and diseases. It's what opens the doors to brand new medicines and helps us unravel incredibly complex problems, like cancer growth. It is absolutely the bedrock of modern biology. Moving right along to Section 2, the chemical recipe of cells. Let's transition from those abstract concepts down to the actual raw materials of our cellular construction site. Now, chemically speaking, a staggering 70 to 90% of a cell is just water. It's an incredible number, right? But to really get a grip on the structural building blocks, I want you to imagine taking a cell and just completely evaporating all of that water. Poof, gone. What on earth are we left with once the water's out of the picture? Well, what remains is called the dry weight. And this remaining mass is where the absolute magic happens. It consists almost entirely of carbon-containing long-chain organic molecules. And these biomolecules are the actual tangible chemical building blocks we've been looking for. And what are those biomolecules actually made of? If we break them down to their core elemental raw materials, we find what's known as the big six elements. We've got carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus, and sulfur. These six elements alone make up approximately 98% of those biomolecules. They are essentially the fundamental alphabet that spells out the extraordinarily complex language of life. Which brings us to Section 3, the four fundamental biomolecules. Now, what's really interesting about this next step in our zoom-in journey is how life's unbelievable diversity is actually organized into just four fundamental biomolecules. It's kind of wild. Think of the units as specific types of bricks and the linkages as the highly specific mortar holding our cellular building together. So for carbohydrates, the bricks are monosaccharides, and they're held together by glycosidic linkages. Proteins, they're built from amino acids, secured by peptide linkages. Lipids use glycerol and fatty acids, joined tightly by ester linkages. And finally, nucleic acids, like your actual DNA, are made of nucleotides locked together by phosphodiester linkages. Every single living thing you have ever laid eyes on is built using variations of this exact same recipe. Section 4 already, comparing cell chemical compositions. Okay, so we know the building blocks, but how does the final recipe actually differ between wildly different organisms? Well, when you compare the chemical composition of a tiny basic bacterial cell to a highly complex mammalian cell, the similarities are actually pretty humbling. Despite the immense evolutionary gap between the two, both are around 70% water. Mammalian cells are about 18% protein, while bacterial cells are 15%. Carbohydrates and lipids, they sit right around 2 to 4% for both. The most significant variations are really just in the slightly different proportions of DNA and RNA. So ultimately, we're all using the exact same basic blueprint.
And our final stop, Section 5, building and breaking macromolecules.
So we've seen the raw materials. Now we're stepping onto the active construction and demolition site that's happening inside your body at this very second. The biomolecules we just talked about are mostly what we call macromolecules, or polymers. The prefix poly just means many, and mers means parts, so many parts. These are huge, highly organized molecules constructed from large numbers of really small, repeating subunits called monomers. I like to think of monomers as individual rail cars. By themselves, they're small, they're simple, but when they couple together, they form these massive, highly functional polymer. This might sound like an abstract chemistry lesson, but this is literally your daily metabolism at work. When you eat food, let's say a complex carbohydrate, your body's digestion process breaks those massive macromolecules down into their tiny monomer parts through hydrolysis. Then, those individual monomer railcars are absorbed and they travel all the way through your system to your individual cells. Once they arrive, your cells use condensation to reassemble those very same monomers into brand new macromolecules, creating your own unique tissues and enzymes. You are, quite literally, dismantling the world around you and rebuilding it into yourself every single day. To wrap things up, I want to leave you with a really thought-provoking question, directly from our source text, one that really highlights the bleeding edge of biochemistry today. And that question is, what is the mechanism of memory? It is absolutely wild to sit and ponder how these seemingly simple, microscopic chemical reactions, the condensation and hydrolysis of monomers, driven by just 6 basic elements, how do they somehow string together in such an extraordinarily complex way to generate human thoughts, deep emotions, and your oldest, most cherished memories? The building blocks of life are incredibly simple, but what they build is infinitely profound. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer today, and I really hope this journey leaves you just a little bit fascinated by the absolute brilliance happening inside you right now.